Welcome to episode 200 of the Selling Your Screenplay podcast. I'm Ashley Scott Myers, screenwriter and blogger over at sellingyourscreenplay.com. Today I'm interviewing producer Dana Lustig. She has been producing for years and just did a movie with Daniel Radcliffe called Jungle. So we talk about that film as well as how she got her start in the business and how she currently finds scripts to produce. So stay tuned for that interview. Have a little something special this week to celebrate the 200th episode, and I want to thank Jordan Imiola and Daniel Begg for it. They created a top 10 SYS podcast episodes list. So if you're curious what episodes they found most valuable, check it out. Or if you're new to the podcast and are wondering what back episodes you should start with first, this is probably a great place to start. You can find the list at the Better Management website. I'll link to it in the show notes. It's a kind of a long URL, so it's probably easier if I just put it in the show notes and then you can click over to it. If you remember, Jordan came on the podcast back in episode number 57 to talk about his writing career and recent successes. So check out that episode if you want to learn a little bit more about him. Since then, Jordan has been very busy. He runs Better Management, and through Better Management, he has produced the web series Romantically Hopeless and Monster Therapy. I will link to both of those shows in the show notes. They've been publishing new episodes of Monster Therapy for the last few weeks. That's a great little short web series, and I've been following Better Management on Twitter, and that's actually how I've been able to see the Monster Therapy. So if you use Twitter, maybe check out their Twitter account as well, and that is at better_MGMT. So it's the word better, BETTER_MGMT. Again, I'll link to it in the show notes. So if it gets confusing, no worries. Just find episode number 200 and just look for those links. Anyway, I want to thank Jordan and Daniel again for creating this list. I think it's a great way to celebrate 200 episodes. I was actually, excited to see it and just see what episodes other people think are helpful. Some of them were surprises and some of them were probably episodes that I thought were great as well. So anyways, if you're interested in that, I'll link to it in the show notes. If you find this episode valuable, please help me out by giving me a review in iTunes or leaving a comment on YouTube or retweeting the podcast on Twitter or liking it on Facebook. These social media shares really do help spread word about the podcast, so they're very much appreciated. Over on iTunes, I want to thank Buddies06, who left me a very nice review. Thank you for that. It is very much appreciated. It sounds like Buddies06 is a new writer and feels like he's getting some good information from the podcast. So that's great to hear. It's nice to know someone is out there listening and learning from this. Recording the podcast is a kind of a strange thing because when I'm here recording, I'm just sitting here by myself talking into my microphone, wondering if anybody is ever even going to listen to this. It certainly doesn't feel like it when you're actually doing the recording. So then you see these types of reviews and, they're just nice to see and nice to get some feedback that there are actually people out there. So if you have a minute, please do consider leaving me some ratings and reviews over at iTunes. Once again, they really are appreciated. And thanks again to Buddies06 for leaving your nice comment. Any websites or links that I mentioned in the podcast can be found on my blog in the show notes. I also publish a transcript with every episode in case you'd rather read the show or look at something later on. You can find all the podcast show notes at www.sellingyourscreenplay.com/podcast, and then just look for episode number 200. If you want my free guide, How to Sell a Screenplay in 5 Weeks, you can pick that up by going to sellingyourscreenplay.com/guide. It's completely free. You just put in your email address and I'll send you a new lesson once per week for 5 weeks along with a bunch of bonus lessons. I teach the whole process of how to sell your screenplay in that guide. I'll teach you how to write a professional logline and query letter and how to find agents, managers, and producers who are looking for material. Really is everything you need to know to sell your screenplay. Again, to get that free guide, just go to sellingyourscreenplay.com/guide. So a quick few words about what I'm working on. Quick update on The Pinch, the crime action thriller feature film that I am finishing up. I'm making some good progress. As I mentioned last week, I was able to pick up the hard drive from my dialogue editor, hand it off to my final sound mixer, and I actually got a text late last night from my mixer saying that he was almost done his first pass. So I'm hoping today he will send that along, and then this week I'll be able to get a good listen on kind of what he's done with that. So that's exciting. There's going to probably be a few more tweaks here and there, but we're definitely moving in the right direction now. And I started to ramp up last week my marketing efforts for the film. I've now sent out, quite a few emails to different distributors and and just starting to try and figure out what kind of a reaction I'm going to get from the film. I've even had a couple of distributors already show interest in representing the film, so that's great. The problem with the low-end distributors is that it's often hard to figure out if they're trustworthy or not. And when I say low-end, I'm not in any way trying to be disparaging to these distributors. I mean, The Pinch is a low-end movie. It's a micro-budget film. It doesn't have any famous cast. So it's not necessarily disparaging to say, well, it's a low-end. It's really just sort of a fact that The Pinch is really going to struggle to find a place in the market. So the distributors that are going to be willing to take this on are not the ones that are distributing the higher end films. And that's fine. But as I said, sometimes it's hard to really get a feel for what these distributors are going to do and if they're actually going to pay you. So it's, I'd say rocky waters to navigate, which is sort of the next piece of this for me. In this day and age, I kind of feel like self-distribution is also a very real possibility. I have some friends that have dabbled in that. So I know a little bit about it. There's several services that can get you up fairly easily and cheaply on places like iTunes and Amazon. And so it's pretty much, once you're on iTunes and Amazon, you're pretty much widely available. And a bunch of the other, paid video on demand services. There's a number of them out there, but they're fairly easy to get on. And as I said, once you get on those, that's a pretty wide release. Pretty much everybody in the world can find your movie. But then it's just a matter of marketing it and getting word out to people that your movie actually exists. Hopefully I can do that a little bit through the podcast. And then I know some other people that run filmmaking podcasts. Hopefully I can go on their podcast, maybe talk about how I made the film, and maybe that can promote it. So that's one angle I'm definitely considering, is the self-distribution. Maybe even finding one of these distributors that will take like the cable TV rights or something like that, things that I know I'm never going to be able to pursue. Maybe that's a good fit. But if I can kind of keep the Amazon and the iTunes for self-distribution, and then give one of these more, sort of old school distributors, give them those rights to try and work out some cable TV deals around the world. I think that's probably ideal, because a lot of these distributors, a lot of the low-end distributors, it kind of just feels like they are basically just doing what I'm going to be doing, which is throwing it up on iTunes and Amazon, and then they take like 35% of the money you make, whereas I can just do that myself. So some of the responses I've gotten back from these distributors that are showing interest, they feel like almost form letters. It's not even always clear that they've even watched the movie. It feels more like they're just operating from just purely a numbers game, which is to say they get as many movies as they can that they wanted. They just basically will represent virtually anything. Maybe they looked at a few minutes of the film just to make sure that like technically it was going to meet, whatever broadcast standards these different outlets might have. But once they saw that, then it's just kind of like send out form letters and see which filmmakers decide to sign up with their service. And then, as I said, they can throw it up on iTunes and Amazon very, very easily. And then they can make some small percentage of that money. So I don't know. These are all things that I'm kind of working through and trying to figure out. But I'm definitely starting that process. And then probably this week or next week, I will start to also consider, film festivals and start to figure out that whole route as well. So on the writing front, last week I finished up the second episode of the kids TV show that I've been working on. The producers are trying to get funding in place so that hopefully we can shoot these first 6 episodes sometimes in the early part of next year. There's a few things that have to happen for this project to move forward, and we're sort of waiting for some of those things to happen now. So hopefully they can get those things together. I'm probably going to try and bang out another couple episodes before they're completely ready to go. I've been enjoying writing them, and they haven't been overly difficult. And the producer is happy to have me at this point to just get ahead of the curve a little bit and get some of these episodes written. So that'll probably be my writing assignment. But at least for this week and next, I might just wait and kind of see how some of these other angles that the producers are working on turn out. Because obviously, if they don't turn out well, then they're not going to need any scripts, much less 6 of them. So anyways, that's where I'm at with my writing. So now let's get into the main segment of the podcast. Today I'm interviewing producer Dana Lustig. Here is the interview. Welcome, Dana, to the Selling Your Screenplay podcast. I really appreciate you coming on the show with me today.
Thank you for having me.
So to start out, maybe you can give us a little bit about your background. Where did you grow up, and how did you become interested in the entertainment business?
I grew up in Israel. And I consider myself a storyteller. Whatever I do in film, whether it's writing, directing, acting, producing, it's about telling stories. And I was a storyteller since I was, I think, 10 years old, when I had my own little puppet theater in the neighborhood in Herzliya Pituach, a beautiful little town by the beach. I was inspired. I think the first movie that inspired me was Heidi in the Mountains. I don't know if you know the movie.
No.
Yeah, I saw the movie actually in Switzerland without translation. I didn't understand anything, but it's about a girl that comes, an orphan that lived in the mountains, and she comes to the city and meets a very rich girl on a wheelchair. And it's all about their relationship and how at the end of the movie, the Heidi from the mountains helps this this young girl to actually walk. So it's a story about hope and overcoming a physical handicap.
Yeah.
And I think that kind of thing led me throughout life. And I think Jungle, and we'll get to that later, is also a story about hope. So it's the first movie that inspired me. I went to the army in Israel, like we all do, and came to the United States to attend the AFI, the American Film Institute, and just stayed here and started my career here in LA.
Okay. Let's just talk just briefly about some of those early steps after AFI. What were the first steps kind of to turn this into a professional career? Was it, working as a PA, working your way up? Maybe just talk about some of those sort of first steps to actually becoming a producer.
Okay. Well, I'll just briefly tell you that it started in the army, where I was an actress in the Army theater. And then I also studied in the Army how to use video cameras and editing and all that stuff. So when I came out of the Army, I already had all of that going. And after AFI, I started working for, as a PA, grip, electric, editor, production manager, production assistant, anything that had to do with movie making, I was in. No ego. I worked on a lot of Roger Corman, if you know who Roger Corman.
Yep.
A lot of his movies. I gripped and I was electric for a lot of the top DPs, Janusz Kaminski, Wally Pfister, Faden Papamichael, all are Mauro Fiore, all are, Oscar-winning top DPs today. And we all started together, and I was, and we all worked together again. No long hours for $50 a day, and just wanted to be in and learn from every aspect of movie making. And I think it helps a lot.
Yeah. And so, what was your first step to actually becoming a producer, moving from sort of the grip, the electrician, sort of actually going and saying, okay, I'm going to now be a producer? What were those steps, and what exactly did you do?
Yeah, so another AFI graduate, Yoram Barzilai, hired me as an actual production manager, and that was the first real responsibility, so I did that, and while doing that, I met, I had an amazing PA that worked with me and was the first one on set and last one to leave. And we started dreaming together about making movies. And we just decided after that experience that next we're going to do our own movies. It was just a simple decision that we're going to move from being PAs and working for other people to actually doing our own. And that kind of connects to your, specifically to your program. And we started looking for scripts. That's exactly what we did. We were like, okay, so if you want to make a movie in Hollywood, whether as a director or as a producer, whatever you want to do, you need content. It's number one. Without content, you're nobody. So we started reading tons of scripts, coming up with ideas for movies, for stories, reading books. Intellectual property. That's the key. And we started developing some projects. And we did our first movie, I think it was $100,000. We just raised it from, we did it with an equity waiver theater director, and we sent letters to all of his subscribers, and each one of the subscribers gave it $5,000, $10,000. One woman gave us $50,000, and we just went out there and shot the movie. And from that, it grew. But it's all about script.
Yeah, yeah. So just maybe you can tell us, and I know things have changed since then over the last few years, but where did you actually start to look for scripts? Because this is one of the big thing I tell writers is that, especially new writers, they want to, everyone wants to hook up with Spielberg and Martin Scorsese, but it's like, if you're a new writer, look for those producers that are coming up through the ranks, exactly what you're describing, the PA who now wants to be the producer. And so maybe just give us some sort of idea, where were you finding these scripts and where were you looking, and maybe how can writers get themselves in front of those up and coming producers?
I think that what you said is so precise, and it's from the other way around the same. So as a beginner producer or director, I didn't have the financing to go out there and option, the next big bestseller or a Stephen King book or anything like that, of course. So I had to find scripts, either write them myself, which I did, or find people that will collaborate with me. So they had to be at a lower level in terms of where they are in their career, not in terms of the level of their writing. So AFI is a great, the first place I went was AFI students, writing students. And I just sat, while I was at AFI, I was in the producing program, but I sat throughout the time, I sat in all the screenwriting classes to see who are the top screenwriters in my class. And those are the people that I actually worked with. For the first 3 movies that I did, I had AFI graduates working with me. And that's where I found the scripts and the ideas. The first 2 movies, I actually came up with the idea and collaborated with an AFI student, and we wrote the story and outline together, and she wrote the script.
I see.
And those are the movies that I produced and directed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, perfect.
Which I'm very proud of until today.
Yeah. So let's dig into your most recent film, Jungle, starring Daniel Radcliffe. Maybe just to start out, you can give us a quick overview of the film, pitch, logline. Just kind of tell us a little bit about that story.
Okay. So Jungle is based on a true story of survival, incredible true story of survival, and it's based on a best-selling book from Israel. It was first originally written in Hebrew about a backpacker. That's what we all do after the army. We all take our backpacks. I didn't, but a lot of people do, and go to South America, go to Thailand, go to the Far East, and just go into nature. And he goes with 2 friends and a guide, and they go into the jungle and sort of almost into the heart of darkness. Mm-hmm. And everything falls apart when they are in the jungle, and they split into 2 and 2 groups. 2 of them supposedly get out of the jungle in the middle of the story, and they're never found, actually. And the 2 others, they get on the river, they go on the raft, and they have a horrendous rafting accident, and they split. Mm-hmm. And Yossi, our hero, is left alone to survive for 21 days in the jungle in the rainy season. Mm-hmm. Let me tell you, I would have been extinct half an hour into that adventure. But he survived 21 days, and we'll get into that survival method. And he was finally saved by his friend, Kevin, who was found just a few days later and came back in on a very heroic expedition to find his friend, and miraculously found him, and he was saved. But the story is a story of, it's an action adventure movie, and it's a survival movie, but it's also a very, very spiritual journey, and it talks about faith, hope, friendship, surrendering to the elements, just becoming one with nature. Mm-hmm. That's I think the magic of it.
So maybe you can back us up a little bit and just tell us, how did you become involved with this story?
So I read the book many, many years ago when it first came out, and the book stayed with me and really gave me hope personally in my moments of struggle or, facing any kind of adversity. Mm-hmm. And I directed the movie with Jennifer Love Hewitt. It was like a fun romantic comedy, and I came home and I was like, okay, the next movie I want to do something with real meaning. And I stood in front of my library at home, and I was like, the book just jumped into my hand. I was looking through my books that I love, and the book just literally jumped into my hand. And I was like, well, what happened? I wonder what happened to Yossi's story. And because I knew it was optioned a few times, and it was about to be shot. And so I found Yossi, and I called him, and I found out the book is free and available. So I met with Yossi, and I tried to convince him to give me the rights. And he didn't at first. He was like, no, I'm looking for something bigger. I don't know what he had in mind. And I was like, I'm not going to give up on that. And I just kept pursuing him and pursuing him and pursuing him. And finally he agreed. And I think that part of what convinced him were my determination. And I said, Yossi, I'm going to make this movie happen. I promise you. And more than I promise you. And the other thing that I think that really affected his decision was that I promised to be true to the characters, to who they are, and not try to change the story and over dramatize it and make it Rambo in the jungle and suddenly come up with all kind of stuff, but really stay true to what the movie is about. And the last thing I think that convinced him was that we became partners instead of me just optioning. It's just good to know for writers, especially in the beginning stage. But instead of optioning your script for a little bit of money for I don't know how long, he became my partner. So whatever I was going to make, he was going to make. Whatever success, he would share exactly the success with me. So it was a very fair deal. Mm-hmm. And he was very involved with the script and with how, he's going to be portrayed and how the book is, how the book is going to be translated into a movie. And I think that helped him make that decision.
Yeah. Did you have a relationship with the author before this point? Because the way you made it sound like you just called him up. I'm sure if you didn't know him beforehand, getting his number was probably the first step.
Yeah. I met him through friends and through his previous producer years before, but it was a very, it was kind of like he was an acquaintance, not a close friend. Yeah. And when I just looked for his number and through friends got to him. But I believe it's 6 degrees in separation. You can get to anybody if you really want to, especially today.
Yeah, sure. So just in the next phase of this, then you have Yossi signed on. You guys are partners. Then how did you go about finding a screenwriter to adapt that book into a screenplay?
Well, the first thing, I had to actually raise enough money to hire a screenwriter, a proper screenwriter for this, because I wanted to really go with somebody great. So I had, an investor that I found that was very committed. His name is Jay Rappaport, and he, because he was a big supporter, a big admirer of the book. Like I said, the book had a large following. And then I flew to Australia, and because I knew that Australia gives a lot of money and a lot of incentives to movies with great funds, and there's great jungles in Australia, and I thought, and they have a great film infrastructure. They have great filmmakers there. So I flew to Sydney and met with the top writers in Australia, and just met Justin Monjo, who's a great writer, and we just clicked. He liked it. He loved my pitch. He read the book. We talked about it, and I hired him to write the script.
Okay.
And we worked a lot together, Skype every night for a long time, coming up with the outline. It's not easy to take a true story and find what to tell, and more important, it's what not to tell and how to make it a coherent story. So
how did Justin and all these other screenwriters, how did they get that meeting with you? Did you go to agents in Australia and say, what writers do you have? Let's see some submissions. Maybe just talk about that process. If a writer is trying to get a job, how do they even get that first meeting?
Yeah, I met with a lawyer, Eric Feig, who happened to know the Australian industry very well. And he introduced me to just like 2 or 3 local producers in Sydney. And I flew in and I just called all those producers, had meetings with them, and each one of them gave me 1 or 2 names of writers.
I see.
And I just called them. In Australia, it's pretty simple. You just pick up the phone and call. It's like in Israel. It's not that formal or agent-like and all that. Yeah. And the other thing that I did is I watched a lot of the Australian movies and kind of decided what movies I liked and approached the writers through that. But it was sort of luck. I was sitting at lunch with one of the producers. He recommended Justin. I called Justin. He happened to be available. That afternoon we met, we clicked and went for it. But I also looked for writers here first in LA, and I did it through agents.
Okay. So let's turn to the business side of a story like this. I watched the movie and I really enjoyed it. It's well made. It's an excellent film. But I wonder, like, what is the marketing angle? And I ask this. I have a lot of people that come on my podcast that are doing sort of the genre movies, the low budget action, the horror, and the audience is a little more clear in those cases. And I'm just curious if you can kind of speak to what is your angle to market this, and ultimately how are you going to find the audience once you decide who the audience is?
Sure. Well, there's 2 stages for that. The stage of the writing of the script and developing, and now obviously marketing it. So the experts on marketing are E1, our distributors, and they're really handling, just like I got this interview, right? So they know who to talk to and what's the right publications and who will be interested in this and who will not. It's not as much my thing, but I really think that it's a universal story that can really talk to both older people, really get, I just came back from Israel and it was playing in the Haifa Film Festival. Festivals are always a great platform to start a buzz about a movie. But, in Haifa we had 2 screenings, 1,000 people in each screening. And you could see the power of the movie. You could see how it works on teenagers, older people, young people that are just about to go to the jungles, or you can see how it really worked, all over the platform of all over, not platform, but all over the ages of people and different audience. It's incredible, and I think it's because of one thing: survival. I think survival talks to all of us, whether we survive, God forbid, a disease, or we survive a heartbreak or a separation from a loved one, or we're anything that happens to us. We all have a broken heart, and we all have adversary in our lives, and we all have just those moments of struggle. And I think that whether you're an older person, or you're a teenager, that's what we all go through all the time. So a survival story talks to all of us, especially if it has sort of a happy ending.
Yeah. What's funny is, and I've had this conversation with other non-Americans, in the American canon is, Jack Kerouac is a big force. And I don't know how, but that was sort of what struck me about the movie, is sort of the wanderlust and the adventure trail and getting out there. It was all those things. Just going back to one thing you said about E1 is kind of handling the marketing and distribution on this. Was there some conversations with E1 early in the process where you brought them the script and said, this is what we have? Do you think this would be a viable potential movie that you guys could distribute?
Yes, they bought the movie at what we call a pre-sale. They bought the movie before it was made. They bought it based on the script and based on Daniel Radcliffe's attachment. So they saw the potential all along, and that's why they joined. And once the movie was completed, they were really the leading force, helping, putting it out, deciding how and where, and all that. kind of stuff.
And certainly Daniel Radcliffe is an international star, so I can see definitely how that would help. Certainly, obviously, you have to have a good script. But I'm curious, how much did the success of the book, the original book, and knowing that there's a fan base for the original book, how much did that play into E1's interest in the project?
I think it did somewhat. But really, I think that at that point, the project sort of had its own life. It was about the script. It was about the director. It was about the locations that we're going to shoot in. The fact that today you see Marvel movies and you know that 3/4 of what you see is not real. This is real. We were really in the jungles. We were really on the rivers. We were really in almost dire situations. Where we almost lost 2 stuntmen, and I think there is something to say about that. Daniel Radcliffe really did go on a diet, and it's not just a CGI movie. Of course, you use a little bit of VFX for different things, but I think that the raw element of it and the realism of it was very attractive for E1. And I think it shows on the screen. Yeah,
it definitely does. There was no question that there was a gritty realness to the film. So do you know what the release schedule is going to be like? When is Jungle coming out, and how can people potentially see it?
Well, it's coming out this Friday.
Okay.
And it's coming out in a limited release, but it's what we call day and date. So it's coming out in some theaters, but on the same day it's coming out on VOD. So it'll be available on VOD as of this Friday. Click, watch it, go to the theater. I highly recommend first going to the theater and then doing a home party and watch it with your friends, because I really think that it warrants watching it more than once. And I think it really warrants watching it in the theater. Again, watching it with 1,000 people in the theater in Israel and hearing people going, ooh, wow, getting scared, laughing when you're supposed to laugh, crying out loud. I think that's why cinema still lives, because there's something different about the communal experience of watching a movie together rather than just watching it alone at home.
Yeah, for sure. What is the best way for people to keep up with what you're doing? Anything you're comfortable sharing, a Facebook page, Twitter handle, Instagram?
Sure. My Facebook, of course, under my name, Dana Lustig, D-A-N-A, Lustig, L-U-S-T-I-G. I should upgrade my game on Twitter and all that stuff. I was just so busy doing stuff. But yes, Facebook is a great start, and I promise to upgrade the rest of the stuff and to keep the feed going. I just did another movie, so when that comes out, and so I would love to keep in touch with your audience and with you and let you know how things are going.
Perfect.
And I hope you will all come. Yeah, and if anybody has a question or a specific thing, post it, ask it, I'll reply.
Perfect. Well, I really appreciate it. As I said, I really enjoyed the film. I wish you the luck with it. And of course, you're always welcome to come back. So on your next film, be happy to have you on and we can talk about that one.
Okay. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you. We'll talk to you later.
Okay. Sure.
Bye. Just want to mention 2 things I'm doing at Selling Your Screenplay to help screenwriters find producers who are looking for material. First, I've created a monthly newsletter that will be sent directly to producers. Every member of SYS Select can submit 1 logline per newsletter. I went and I emailed my large database of producers and asked them if they would like to receive this monthly newsletter of pitches. So far, I have around 400 producers who have signed up to receive it. These producers are hungry for material and happy to read scripts from new writers. So if you want to participate in this pitch newsletter and get your script into the hands of lots of producers, sign up at sellingyourscreenplay.com. Sign up at sellingyourscreenplayselect.com. And secondly, I partnered with one of the premier paid screenwriting leads sites so I can syndicate their leads to SYS Select members. There are lots of great paid leads coming in each week from our partner. Recently, I've been getting 5 to 10 high-quality paid leads per week. These are producers and production companies who are actively looking to buy material or who are looking to hire a screenwriter for a specific project. If you sign up for SYS Select, you'll get these leads emailed directly to you several times per week. These leads run the gamut from from production companies looking for a specific type of spec script to producers looking to hire a screenwriter to write up one of their ideas or properties. Producers are looking for shorts, features, TV and web series pilots. It's a huge array of different types of projects that these producers are looking for, and these leads are exclusive to our partner and SYS Select members. So to sign up, again, just go to sellingyourscreenplayselect.com. Again, that's sellingyourscreenplayselect.com. On the next episode of the podcast, I'm going to be interviewing writer, director, producer Lanre Oloblisi. He's done a number of independent features and shorts, and he comes on to talk about the process of writing, directing, and producing all of these films. So keep an eye out for that episode next week. To wrap things up, I just want to touch on a few things from today's interview with Dana. So first, I want to really make sure everyone paid attention to what she said about how she found scripts when she was starting out. She looked for people from the film school, in her case, AFI, that she went to, and that makes perfect sense, right? I mean, that's like the obvious place for a producer. If they went to film school, the obvious place, they have connections there. It's easy to go and approach those professors and say, who are your top screenwriting students? Do they have some scripts? So that's kind of an obvious thing. And if you've been to a film school, that's something to maybe pursue, as well as maybe try and find some other, some of the people that were in the producing program at the film school you were at, and network with those people, meet those people, and maybe collaborate with them. But a lot of these types of up-and-coming writers and directors are placing ads right now on services like Craigslist and in publications like the leads that I just talked about for SYS Select. These are the sorts of producers and directors you really should be getting to know. Somewhat ironically, I think I just read about Spielberg's new film, and it was from a brand new screenwriter. So it is Hollywood and anything can happen. But in general, these very experienced directors and producers have a ton of contacts in the industry, and they have access to all the hottest properties. So while maybe it's not impossible, it's very unlikely that a guy like Spielberg or James Cameron or Martin Scorsese is going to want to shoot your most recent spec script. And this may sound comical to some people, but I get a lot of emails from people saying stuff like, hey, do you know Martin Scorsese? Hey, can you get me in touch with Martin Scorsese? I have the perfect script for him to direct. Oh, he's going to love it. And it always is like, well, wait a minute. There's a million other directors in Hollywood that are, far from sort of the top of the pyramid. And those are the people that you should be trying to get in touch with, and those are the directors and those are the producers. It's unlikely, again, and it's not impossible, but it's unlikely that Martin Scorsese is going to read your script and then go and make it. But again, just keep this in mind about these other services. Craigslist is obviously free, so there's really no excuse to not use that one. Obviously, SYS Select, there is a monthly fee to it, so maybe it's not a good fit for everyone. But I would just really encourage you to find these types of leads. There's another one I've looked at somewhat, Mandy.com. I think they post leads for writers as well, and I've seen over the years some leads there. So again, there are services out there, whether it be paid services like SYS Select or even free services out there that, kids fresh out of film school, they get out and they want to produce something, and they go to these types of services. They post an ad. So that's really your best bet. It's a great way to just sort of get in front of the people who are going to be the Spielbergs of tomorrow. They are going to be the James Camerons of, the next 15, 20 years. So meeting those people early in their careers is the smartest thing you can do. And those people are hungry to find scripts, and they're hungry to find good writers that can consistently write projects that they want to direct and that they want to produce. So it's very much a win-win. It's not just this Martin Scorsese plucking you from obscurity and doing you a huge favor. When you're working at this level, people are working with people at your own level. There's synergy there. There's, you're helping them and they're helping you. And that's just a much better position, much more realistic position to get yourself into. So the second thing I want to talk about is how she was able to secure the rights to the book, Jungle. It was her persistence and passion for the project. I mean, persistence and passion are really two keys to success in this industry, and that's no matter what side of the equation you're on, whether you're on the producing side or the writing side. But the main takeaway for me was when she told us what she said to the author of this book, and it was something like, I'm going to make this movie. She assured him she was going to make this movie, and she was going to be true to the story and characters, kind of see his artistic vision onto the screen. And that's a very powerful thing. I mean, number one, having a producer with a track record record like Dana has, that's, you know, very attractive from a writer's perspective. And B, having a producer, you know, tell you that she, or it could be a he, is going to preserve the artistic integrity of your project. I mean, that's a very rare thing. And I can tell you, as a screenwriter who's optioned numerous scripts, sold a few scripts, that's, you know, really something you want to think about when you're talking to the producer. Those are the sorts of things you want to listen to, because those are really where your project is going to live and die. Notice Dana didn't go to him and say, I'm going to make you rich, I'm going to give you a boatload of money. That was not part of her pitch. The pitch was much more about the artistic integrity of this project and seeing this thing through so that they could be proud of it and so that his vision was realized. And again, as a screenwriter who has gone through this process many, many times, I can tell you that it's very rare that you find a producer like Dana, but even more importantly, when you do, you've got to listen to those things and you've got to navigate the waters of these producers telling you things. So really be conscious of what the producer's telling you, what they're putting the emphasis on. And I have found early on in the process, producers are usually pretty open, and you can ask them questions like, well, what changes do you think need to be made to the script? And those sort of open-ended questions can give you a lot of information about whether you think this producer is a good fit for your project. And it's not always easy to figure out, but it is a big part of the process. And so I think, again, this is great, having someone like Dana come on here and listen to her, you know, talk and how she approaches projects and stuff, and say, gee, you know, look at her, go on IMDb and look at her track record of projects. You know, are these the sorts of projects that you're hoping your scripts turn into? And then maybe there's some clues, some things that she said that, you know, you'll hear from another producer. You can say, yeah, you know, this is sort of the direction I want to go. Because what tends to happen with screenwriters, when you do find the producers and you start to option stuff, you know, producers have different sensibilities, and sometimes they come at your script from a completely different angle, and they don't necessarily see in it what you see in it, and that can lead to, you know, disappointment. It can lead to a lot of changes to the script. So getting out front of these things and having these conversations with these producers, and again, listening to what they're saying and reading between the lines. It's not going to be about how much money you're going to make, especially early in your career. It's going to be more about the quality of the film, and if it's a good film, maybe that can, you know, keep your career going, get your career going. But if it's not a quality film, if the producer is not interested in making a quality film, that's going to be very, very difficult. Anyway, that's the show. Thank you for listening.